Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big ideas. Today we're diving into artificial intelligence, but we're looking at it through a really surprising lens, literature, to investigate the hidden biases that get baked right into its code.
So, let's start with the big question. We tend to think of technology as being totally neutral, right? A clean slate. But here's the thing. What happens when AI learns from us? From our language, our stories, all our data? Well, it means it also learns our hidden assumptions.
To really get our heads around how AI can be biased, we first need to understand a very human idea, unconscious bias.
Professor Dilit P. Barad calls this a flaw in thinking, and it's a great way to put it. It's when our beliefs, which are often formed without any direct experience, start to feel like concrete knowledge. It's kind of like the mental autopilot we're all on.
So, an AI is trained on the internet, on books, on pretty much everything we've ever written. And since that data is just a giant mirror of our world, it reflects our societal biases right back at us. The AI is basically learning from a curriculum we didn't even know we were writing. So how in the world do we find these hidden biases? Well, this is where it gets really fascinating. We can actually use skills from a totally different field, literary studies, to become AI detectives.
The connection here is so powerful. Think about the way a literary critic reads a novel to find subtext and hidden power dynamics. We can use that exact same approach to analyze an AI's output and see what cultural assumptions it's running on.
And this is our toolkit. Feminist criticism is great for spotting gender stereotypes. Post-colonialism helps reveal biases about colonialism and global power. Critical race theory lets us see how race and power are encoded in systems. Queer theory challenges those default assumptions about gender and sexuality. And subaltern studies helps us listen for the voices that are typically silenced. Altogether, they become our magnifying glass for investigating AI.
All right, let's look at some hands-on experiments from Professor Barad's lecture. This is where we put the theory into practice and actually see these biases in action.
So our first experiment uses feminist criticism to hunt for gender stereotypes. It's actually drawing on this literary concept of the madwoman in the attic, which is all about how women in literature were often pigeonholed as either angels or monsters.
A really simple and what seems like a totally neutral prompt was given to an AI. The keywords to listen for here are Victorian and scientist. Let's see what the AI's unconscious assumptions are.
And boom, there it is. The AI gives back a story starring a Dr. Edmund Bellamy, a male physician. Without being told the scientist's gender, the AI just defaulted to male, which perfectly mirrors a historical bias that links intellectual and scientific jobs to men.
Okay, this next experiment shows us something a little different. This isn't just about an unconscious societal bias. This is about deliberate, programmed political control.
So Professor Barad asked the DeepSeek AI model to write satirical poems about different world leaders. It had no problem generating poems about Trump, Putin, and Kim Jong-un. But when it got to China's leader, the response was, well, very different.
The model just completely refused. Now, this isn't some unconscious bias it picked up from the data. This is a hard-coded limitation, a deliberately programmed blind spot. And it proves that some biases aren't accidental at all. They're there by design. This all leads us to a really important and kind of tricky question. How can we tell the difference between a harmful prejudice and what might just be a consistent, logical perspective?
Let's use a case study. An AI is asked about the Pushpaka Vimana, which is a flying chariot from the epic Ramayana. The AI calls it mythical. Now, for some users, this feels like a bias against their culture, dismissing something they see as history. So, how do we test this?
Well, you can test for consistency. You ask a control question. How does the AI treat flying carpets from Arabian stories or flying chariots from Greek myths? If it applies the myth label to all of them, it's not a bias. It's just operating on a uniform standard. But if it only singles out one culture, then you've found a clear prejudice.
So after seeing all of this, what's the big takeaway? How should we be thinking about these powerful new tools? The reality is, every system, whether it's human or artificial, has a perspective. The goal can't be to find some mythical, perfectly objective AI. Instead, our goal should be to get really good at seeing the perspectives and questioning the biases that are always going to be there.
And this quote really just nails it. A bias you can see is a bias you can account for. The real danger is in the biases that become so common, so ingrained, that we stop seeing them as just a perspective and we start treating them as the one and only truth.
So that leaves us with one final thought. Now that you have this literary detective's toolkit, what subtle assumptions, what invisible defaults are you going to start noticing in the technology you use every single day? What stories are being told, and maybe even more important, which ones are being left out?